Hi class, this assignment for the week is actually in the newer unit that we had first started before we went out on school closure. And if you remember, we read about Mother Jones and how she helped children in labor workshops. And so we're going to continue with that theme. The text for this week is called Flesh and Blood So Cheap, The Triangle Fire and Its Legacy. Now, I'm going to highly recommend, though, that before you even go on to Study Sync, you make sure that you watch the Week 3 overview video that Mrs. Magalong posted, as well as making sure that you go on to the Google slide that gives you all of the directions for the assignments for ELA this week. If you look for today's assignment, we're first going to make sure that we read the learning targets, and we're going to get some information about this text, some background information, and historical context. After that, then I will be going on to make sure that we go through the Study Sync assignment on the actual text. So today's learning targets. We're going to be performing an initial reading of the text and demonstrate comprehension by responding to short analysis and inference questions with textual evidence. And we're also going to practice defining vocabulary words using context. I think that for the most part, you've been doing all right with the quiz questions that are related to vocabulary, but I have been trying to provide some guidance on some synonyms and things like that to help you. So I will also be doing that this week. On to slide 3. Flesh and Blood So Cheap, The Triangle Fire and Its Legacy. So this excerpt from Flesh and Blood So Cheap, The Triangle Fire and Its Legacy is written by Albert Marin, and it examines the tragic 1911 fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, the deadliest workplace accident in the history of New York City. Author Albert Marin combines facts and creative writing elements to explore the Triangle Fire. Like many authors of informational texts, Marin uses a variety of text structures. In addition to an overarching text structure based on sequence, he uses a cause and effects text structure to hook his readers, a comparison and contrast text structure to compare events, and a descriptive text structure to create empathy on the part of his readers. That's 3 different text structures that he's using within only this excerpt. Marin also uses figurative language and other creative elements that are more often found in poetry and fiction than in informational writing. The author ends the excerpt by comparing the Triangle Fire to the terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 was the most lethal workplace tragedy in American history until the attack on the World Trade Center in 2001. In Flesh and Blood So Cheap, Marin traces the history of the garment industry and why the Triangle Fire prompted activists to lobby for reforms, resulting in improved safety standards and working conditions. So this is actually kind of a continuation of even what we talked about before in Mother Jones, is that a lot of these workshops and places where people worked were not very safe anyway. And so we're going to continue on with that theme as well. So as we're reading, remember, we are going to be highlighting vocabulary words in yellow and then try to explain what you think the words mean based on how they are used in the text. You're going to highlight at least 2 sentences that you have questions about in yellow. Enter your questions as annotations. Then in blue, you're going to highlight the main ideas of the excerpt and use the annotation tool to put the main idea in your own words. And finally, highlight 2 examples that show how people reacted to the fire. Use the annotation tool to explain your reaction to what the people are going through in these moments. Now, I would do some of these as we go through it, but I'm not going to do every single one. So make sure that you're following along with me as I'm actually reading it with you here. All right, everyone, so hopefully you are now with me. And again, I would like for you to keep open the 2 tabs that you see. So keep open this slide with the read and annotating directions, as well as the actual slide tab assignment on Study Sync. So I'm not going to read everything with you because I basically read this in the background information, but I would highly suggest that if not now, later, you also make sure that you watch this video on the intro tab. When you get to the read tab, make sure that you have open the annotation and numbers so that way as you go through this, you can annotate. Remember that we are going to see some vocabulary words in bold. You're definitely going to need to pay attention to those as well. I'm going to begin reading. As I told you before, I will help annotate a little bit, but it is your job to make sure that you have followed all of the directions on this slide so that you know what to annotate. Excerpt from Chapter 5, Holocaust. We will never know for sure what started the Triangle Fire. Most likely, a cutter flicked a hot ash or tossed a live cigarette butt into a scrap bin. Whatever the cause, survivors said the first sign of trouble was smoke pouring from beneath a cutting table. Cutters flung buckets of water at the smoking spot, without effect. Flames shot up, igniting the line of hanging paper patterns. They began to fall on the layers of thin goods underneath them, recalled cutter Max Rothen. Every time another piece dropped, light scraps of burning fabric began to fly around the room. They came down on the other tables and they fell on the machines. Then the line broke and the whole string of burning patterns fell down. A foreman ran for the hose on the stairway wall. Nothing. No water came. The hose had not been connected to the standpipe. Seconds later, the fire leaped out of control. Now, this first word, igniting. Obviously, you do want to highlight that in yellow, but I want you to think of when you hear the word ignite. We know that ignite is a verb. And so when you ignite something, it could be that you're, in this case, setting something on fire if you use the context of flames shot up. So I'm going to put that here. Igniting means to set something on fire. Once you do that, make sure that you hit create note so that it saves there for you. You also have another word here, standpipe, but again, for now, I'm not going to give you the actual definition, but I do want you to notice that it says here, the hose had not been connected to the standpipe. Guys, remember, a hose is usually a long rubber circular type of long tube that people use to, in this case, have water shoot out of. So we can kind of get a guess on what standpipe is based on that context. All right, I'm going to continue reading on to paragraph 3. Yet help was already on the way. At exactly 4:45 p.m., someone pulled the 8th floor fire alarm. In less than 2 minutes, the horse-drawn vehicles of Engine Company 72 arrived from a firehouse 6 blocks away. The moment they arrived, the firefighters unloaded their equipment and prepared to swing into action. As they did, the area pumping station raised water pressure in the hydrants near the Ash building. Other units soon arrived from across the Lower East Side with more equipment. Now, in terms of your blue, we're actually just looking for main ideas. So I wouldn't actually use that color to highlight any of the details, but it is important to note that this is happening in the afternoon, 4:45 p.m. This is happening on the Lower East Side, which is in New York City. And so as this is happening, the fire alarms are going off and they're trying to get everybody into action to get there on the scene. Paragraph 4. Meanwhile, workers on the 8th floor rang furiously for the 2 passenger elevators. Safety experts have always advised against using elevators in a fire. Heat can easily damage their machinery, leaving trapped passengers dangling in space to burn or suffocate. Despite the danger, the operators made several trips, saving scores of workers before heat bent the elevator's tracks and put them out of action. All right, here's another word, suffocate. Hopefully you guys know what that word means, but just to give you an example, when you suffocate, you usually cannot breathe so well. Paragraph 5. Those who could not board elevators rushed to the stairway door. They caused a pile-up so that those in front could not open the door. Whenever someone tried to get it open, the crowd pinned her against it. All the girls were falling on me and they squeezed me to the door, Ida Walensky recalled. 3 times I said to the girls, "Please, girls, let me open the door, please." But they would not listen to me. Finally, Cutter Lewis Brown barged through the crowd and forced the doors open. Workers, shouting, crying, and gasping for air, slowly made their way downstairs. There were no lights in the stairway, so they had to grope their way in darkness. A girl fell, others fell on top of her, blocking the stairs until firefighters arrived moments later. Yet everyone who took the stairway from the 8th floor got out alive, exiting through the Washington Place doors. Those on the 9th floor were not so lucky. So this beginning is really giving you a great depiction of what was happening in a sequence of events during this time of the event. And you get a sense that there is a lot of confusion and worry as this is going on. Paragraph 7. Those who reached the 9th floor stairway door found it locked. This was not unusual, as employers often locked doors to discourage latecomers and keep out union organizers. "My God, I am lost!" cried Margaret Schwartz as her hair caught fire. Nobody who went to that door survived, nor any who reached the windows. With a wave of fire rolling across the room, workers rushed to the windows, only to meet more fire. Hot air expands. Unless it escapes, pressure will keep building, eventually blowing a hole even in a heavy iron container like a boiler. Heat and pressure blew out the 8th floor windows. Firefighters called the result lapping in, that is, sucking flames into open windows above. That is why you see black scorch marks on the wall above the window of a burnt-out room. Now, in terms of what we have read so far, if you look at the directions, it says highlight 2 examples that show how people reacted to the fire. And remember, we want to explain the reaction to what the people are going through in those moments. I would suggest this one right here, where Ida Walensky is actually trying to describe what happened as she was in the elevator. So it says again, all the girls were falling on me. I said, please, open the door. So I would say that this example shows how Ida Walensky was reacting to what was happening when she was stuck in the elevator and was scared because others were falling on top of her and wouldn't open the door to get out. I would say that's pretty scary. So that is a good example. If you would like to, you can use that as one of your annotations as well to give you an example. All right, guys, we left off on paragraph 9. With fire advancing from behind and flames rising before them, people knew they were doomed. Whatever they did meant certain death. By remaining in the room, they chose death by fire or suffocation. Jumping 95 feet to the ground meant death on the sidewalk. We cannot know what passed through the minds of those who decided to jump, yet their thinking, in those last moments of life, may have gone like this. If I jump, my family will have a body to identify and bury. But if I stay in this room, there will be nothing. I will just let you know, I would definitely say that this is another great example of a reaction to how people felt during this time. And it is extremely scary. This part right here goes to show some of the terror that those people were experiencing on the 9th floor. And remember, this is a building that I think they're saying may have even been more than just 9 floors, but it's extremely scary because they're high up in a city. So at that time, they were, a pretty good amount of height up in that building. So either way, they would have definitely been unsafe. A girl clung to a window frame until flames from the 8th floor lapped in, burning her face and setting fire to her hair and clothing. She let go. Just then, Frances Perkins reached the scene from her friend's townhouse on the north side of Washington Square. "Here they come!" onlookers shouted as Engine 72 reined in their horses. "Don't jump," Stay there. Seconds later, Hook and Ladder Company 20 arrived. Firefighters charged into the building, stretching a hose up the stairways as they went. At the sixth floor landing, they connected it to the standpipe. Reaching the eighth floor, they crawled into the inferno on their bellies, under the rising smoke with their hose. Yet nothing they did could save those at the windows. Photos of the portable towers show streams of water playing on the top three floors. A modern high rise pressure pumper can send water as high as 1,000 feet. Plenty of water got through the windows, but not those with people standing in them. A burst of water under high pressure would have hurled them backwards into the flames. So it shows that the danger was still there even when they were trying to save them. Because if they actually hit that water into where they were, it would have pushed them back and then they would have caught on fire. Hoping to catch jumpers before they hit the ground, firefighters held up life nets, sturdy 10-foot square nets made of rope. It was useless. A person falling from the ninth floor struck with a force equal to 11,000 pounds. Some jumpers bounced off the nets, dying when they hit the ground. Others tore the nets, crashing through to the pavement. The force was so great it took men off their feet, said Captain Howard Roosh of Engine Company 18. Trying to hold the nets, the men turned somersaults. The men's hands were bleeding, the nets were torn, and some caught fire from burning clothing. Officers, fearing their men would be struck by falling bodies, ordered the nets removed. The aerial ladders failed too, reaching only to the sixth floor. Despite desperate jumpers tried to grab hold of a rung on the way down, missed, and landed on the sidewalk. All right, guys, you do have two more vocabulary words. You have inferno and you have aerial. Remember again, inferno, very similar to, again, a synonym, of fire and ignition. And then aerial, think of that key word, that root word, air. What does that mean? Onlookers saw many dreadful sights, none more so than the end of a love affair. A young man appeared at a window. Gently, he helped a young woman step onto the windowsill, held her away from the building, and let go. He helped another young woman onto the windowsill. Those of us who were looking saw her put her arms around him and kiss him, Shepard wrote. Then he held her out into space and dropped her. But quick as a flash, he was on the windowsill himself. He was brave enough to help the girl he loved to a quicker death after she had given him a goodbye kiss. So sad. By 5:15 p.m., exactly 35 minutes after flames burst from beneath a cutting table, firefighters had brought the blaze under control. An hour later, Chief Croker made his inspection. He found that the ash building had no damage to its structure. Its walls were in good shape, so were the floors. It had passed the test. It was fireproof. The woodwork, furniture, cotton goods, and people who worked in it were not. Of the 500 Triangle employees who reported for work that day, 146 died. Of these, 16 men were identified. The rest were women or bodies, and body parts listed as unidentified. The Triangle Fire was New York's worst workplace disaster up to that time. Only the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center took more lives, which is about 2,500. Guys, obviously, this is a big main idea here. So I would definitely highlight that in blue. And this is a main idea of the text. And if you read the directions, it does say to put the main idea into your own words. So, because it tells how this event was one of the worst disasters in history in the workplace because of how many people died. Okay, that's a really good way to explain that main idea. What I would highly suggest, though, if you are rereading this after you're reading this with me, definitely go back and make sure you have done all of your annotations. I've already done a few for you, but make sure that you go through them and follow this again. Then I would also suggest, if you need to make sure that you rewatch this video, because again, it is a really good video that gives you some direction on that. It's important to note though that with this event, I know that it is a really, really sad story about this, but they also mentioned the World Trade Center. And again, I know that you were not alive during that time, but many of you know what happened. And so when we read accounts about the World Trade Center, we also hear about many of these awful, awful true stories about people and what they did during that time. We know that people were able to get out, but there were many who were not because they were trapped above where the planes hit, and they were trapped. They weren't able to get out. So I know that this is definitely a tougher type of story to read, but again, remember that this is going along with the unit that we are reading so far for this unit. If you remember, our whole unit is actually called Justice Served. So as we get further into this, we're going to learn more about justice and how things are going to be fixed compared to, in the beginning, the powers that be with our last unit. All right, everybody, I hope that this has helped today. Next, we're going to be doing the comprehension questions with you as well. Talk to you soon, everyone. Have a good day.